It's another beautiful day today. It's just incredible. Mid-August, and I bet it feels like September, if not early October. This is just fantastic. It's great. How wonderful it is. Cool evenings, almost chilly. So, well, it appears that the prepper channels are starting to watch my channels where I'm talking about the differences between stockpiling, preppers stockpiling, and self-sustaining, off-grid living. I don't know, last month or so I've been making these videos where I've been talking about the differences and how I believe self-sustaining lifestyle is just much better. Every time I make a poll in my channel, you can go to my channel, you can click up on the tabs and you'll click community tab, and I got a bunch of polls. Every time I make a poll about what is better, stockpiling or self-sustaining, overwhelmingly people come back with self-sustaining. The problem is people who, I don't know what the reasoning is why you wouldn't try to be self-sustaining, but those who say they can't or won't or whatever have to believe that what they're doing is going to work, and it's very minimal people, and it's the stockpilers. I've even heard some say that doing both is better, stockpiling and living self-sustaining. Well, why? You're just wasting money. People will say that my canned goods, we can our winter food every year, so we have about 300 days worth of food, which is more than a winter, but just in case something happens the next year, we'd still have plenty of food for 2 years. So it's not really prepping. I'm not prepping. We just butcher our chickens and then we can our chickens and we have chicken for the winter. That is not stockpiling. That's living self-sustaining. You grow your food, you preserve it. But then you got those folks that of course live in a city and they have to stockpile, and it's just a security blanket. It's not really anything that's going to work. Once you run out of food, you're going to be in the same boat as everybody else who didn't have any food. You're going to be reduced to scavenging, and the real problem is you're not even going to last as long as people who didn't stockpile, because as the scavengers, when SHTF actually hits the fan, the people who didn't stockpile are going to go out and scavenge. They're going to get all the food. They're going to scavenge it all. So you'll run out of food, the stockpilers will, and they will start scavenging. Well, it's already been taken. There's nothing left to scavenge. So they'll go hungry much quicker. So in order to feel good about themselves and let their channels to continue to grow, they have to create fear. They have to tell you that what they're doing is better, and the only way around any situation is to do what they're doing. They have to be convincing so that you'll continue to watch their channel. Well, it was quite obvious that this prepper has been watching my channel, because I'm not making any bones about it. I do not think stockpiling is the way to go. However, I would imagine that stockpilers do see some benefit in self-sustaining. They just can't do it. And they make all kinds of excuses. Well, you have to be an expert in all things in order to live self-sustaining. Well, I don't feel like I'm an expert in all things, but I can live self-sustaining. Now people are going to say, no, you still go to the store. I don't have to. That's the key. We have enough food now that we can live. We produce enough food now that we can live without going to the store. We just like going to the store because prices are still relatively inexpensive. It gives us a variety of foods. Why suffer when we don't have to? But we can live self-sustaining now. And next year is even going to be better, because we'll definitely have enough chickens to produce eggs then. And the more I read, the more I realize eggs are self-sustaining in themselves. You don't really need the chicken meat. I mean, people have been sending me articles about eggs and how nutritional they are. But preppers, they can't be seen as not promoting something that you can do. Well, like I said, prepping and stockpiling is just so expensive. So in order to counter me, this prepper on his channel mentioned why stockpiling is better than living self-sustaining. And he gave all the numbers. But he said that if a nuclear bomb went off on the East Coast or somewhere, that the United States would not be able to grow anything for something like 6 years. Well, that's actually kind of believable. I'm not against that. So when we think about 6 years without growing anything, that means all this that you see right here will die. The trees, the plant life, it's all going to die. So that means all the wildlife is going to die. It means the planet, or at least the United States, will die. If that worst case scenario is true, there is no getting around it. So there's no reason to try to prepare for it. And then after the 6 years, it's not like you're going to just be able to restart, especially if you're not living self-sustainingly. So let's assume for a minute that you can store 6 years worth of food, which I'm going to get to in just a minute. But let's assume you can store 6 years worth of food. So after 6 years, you're running out of food, the sun's starting to pop through the nuclear cloud, and you go out to plant a garden. Well, you don't have a garden. And let me explain why. Seeds, I don't think, will last that long unless you keep them at certain temperatures and you keep them controlled. I mean, there's a lot of things you got to do to make sure that seeds will last that long. And you'd have to have heirloom seeds. How are you going to keep things cold, your seeds, for 6 years without any electric? Remember, you're going to have this big cloud over the sky, so you're not even going to get solar panels, so you won't be able to produce any electric. You might be able to do some wind, maybe. It won't be that reliable, especially here in the Midwest. Maybe in Texas, New Mexico, those kind of areas, wind would do better. Chernobyl, he even brought that up. Chernobyl has been 30 years now, and it's just now getting where it can start to grow plant life. So my question is let's assume that you've overcome all these obstacles and that you can plant your seeds after 6 years. Is there any guarantee that they're going to grow in the contaminated soil? Maybe not. Is the rain that's going to fall down onto the seeds going to have any type of contamination? Let's stockpile 6 years worth of food. This is what he's saying, because obviously what I'm going to do as self-sustaining cannot survive a nuclear war. Just don't do it. You got to stockpile. I'm fully aware that I do not have every contingency plan in place. As a matter of fact, when I started this series, I've always said I'm not a prepper. I live self-sustaining. I live a happy life. And if some point my happy life has to end, then I'm willing to accept that. But I'm not going to try to scare everybody into saying you have to go out and buy 6 years worth of food. First of all, 6 years worth of food, let's call that $24,000 is kind of the math I came up with in my head for a family of 3, 4 maybe. So $24,000. Now Carolyn and I can get around about $150. You know, we'd be a lot less, around $10,000. So $10,000, $24,000 in food to last 6 years. Well, now you got to figure out a place to store all that food. We could can our food, and that's probably what we would do. We would can the meats because we're carnivores, so we'd have to can the meat. Now I know a lot of people are going to say let's use vegetables and carbohydrates and rice and beans. Well, that's just, you're not going to be able to make it. You're going to have more space available for beans and rice. It's just going to take more room because you're going to need more of it to eat, to keep your energy up. Whereas meat and eggs, you don't need as much, less volume of food to do the same amount of work, because carbohydrates is just sugar. That's what rice and beans are. So then if I go can all the meat that I buy, the $10,000 worth of meat, I'm going to have to go out and buy jars. Well, jars are not cheap, and they're hard to find nowadays. And then you got to get lids. And the thing is we only eat about a pint of food a day. Well, it would be actually 2 pints. If we weren't eating any eggs, we'd eat 2 pints of meat each day. But if you're eating carbohydrates, and you're going to have to eat about 2 quarts per person. So that's much more food if you're eating carbohydrates. Now I know this because we currently eat 1 pint of food. Carolyn and I eat 1 pint of food for supper and about 4 eggs for lunch, 3 to 4 eggs for lunch. Okay, so now you're going to spend another probably, I wouldn't even want to imagine what it would cost, but let's say another $10,000 to $20,000 in jars, plus all the time you're going to have to spend canning it. It would take you forever to can that much food, but you're going to can it. Now we have 2 canners, so we can do about 4 batches a day. That's about 40 jars a day that we could do. So canners, you'd have to go out buy 2, 3, 4 canners so you could do that many. It would be a lot of work, but you could do it. Now, storage. This is the important part. Where are you going to put it? You would need a warehouse, seriously, to store that much food. I would imagine you would need something the size of a grocery store to hold 6 years worth of food, depending on your family size, especially if you're eating carbohydrates. If you're canning your food, the temperature has to be somewhat controlled. They say you're supposed to keep your jar temperature around 70 degrees year round. So now you got this warehouse, or the shed, this huge shed, that you're gonna have to run air conditioning and heat in. Now I know some people who's gonna say, oh, I got a basement, I got this or that. Okay, but imagine the size. You don't have enough room. But now let's just assume that you're gonna do it smart. So now you gotta go spend probably another, gosh, I don't know how much, on a big building. Probably a Morton building. You'll go get a Morton building. I don't know, let's call it, I'm gonna go conservatively and say another $50,000 for that building. So now you're up to $70,000 for the building and the food. And then, I don't know, quart jars. Let's just call it an even 100,000 that you're up to now to stockpile for a nuclear war. And then you got to run your air conditioning and heat. That's going to cost you a bundle every year, a couple $1,000s a year. I'm kind of guessing on these. I don't know because I've never done it. And so you're going to survive 6 years longer than everybody else and still not have the ability to grow food. So the fear mongering this prepper did to say that his solution to all problems about stockpiling is better than living self-sustaining. Well, maybe so. He gets 6 more years of life, but in some point I would just say, you know what, it's not worth it. Why would I want to live through that? It would be terrible. I mean, if it's an economic crisis, sure, I'm all for that. If the grid goes down and never comes back up, I'm fine with that. I mean, you're gonna get cancer. There's no way to avoid the cancer. You're gonna get cancer because you've just been radiated for 6 years. So you're gonna have that painful death. There's gonna be a lot of things that, to me, just isn't worth it. So why cause people to fear? And I know it caused fear because when I first watched the video and I hadn't had time to sit down and really analyze what he said, I'm like, my goodness, he's right. There's no way to get through it. So if you'll click that super thanks button down there, I really appreciate it. So I hope I can inspire you to stop being afraid. Live happy so you can live your dreams. Thanks for watching.